The night my father publicly cut me out of my own future, I was sitting under a crystal chandelier pretending I didn't exist. Let me back up. My name is Lena Whitmore. I'm 28, born and raised on Manhattan's Upper East Side, in a townhouse that smelled like old money and emotional neglect. My family owns Whitmore Development Group, luxury high-rises, commercial towers, half of Midtown if you believe the plaques. And for as long as I can remember, I was the dumb one. Not officially, not on paper, but at every family dinner, every Hampton summer party, every Thanksgiving with 12 judges and 3 senators at the table, my father made sure the narrative stuck. My older sister, Caroline, was the golden child, straight A's, debate team captain, Yale undergrad, Harvard Law, the kind of woman who never spilled red wine on white silk and never stumbled over a word. Me, I have dyslexia. Diagnosed at 7, letters flipped, sentences scrambled, reading felt like solving a Rubik's Cube underwater. I learned to cope audiobooks, voice memos, color-coded diagrams, but in my father's world, effort didn't matter. Optics did, and optics said I was defective. The breaking point, Caroline's graduation gala at the Plaza Hotel. 300 guests. Orchestra in the corner playing Gershwin like we were starring in some glossy HBO drama. My mother floated through the ballroom in Valentino, air, kissing donors and whispering, "Caroline's clerking for a federal judge next." I was seated at table 19, near the kitchen doors, next to second cousins who kept asking, "So what exactly do you do again?" I worked at Whitmore Development too. Administrative assistant, Caroline, 275,000 starting package as in-house legal counsel. Same blood, different value. At 8:45 p.m. my father took the stage. Gerald Whitmore, 6'2", custom tux, smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Tonight," he said, raising a champagne flute, "we celebrate excellence." Applause. My eldest daughter has exceeded every expectation. Yale, Harvard, clerkship, partner track at Sullivan and more. More applause. Caroline dabbed fake tears. Then my father did what he always does. He scanned the room like a king surveying peasants, and let his gaze land on me. "And Lena." He paused. The pause lasted just long enough for people to lean in. "Well, Lena is also here." Soft laughter. Not cruel enough to protest. Just cruel enough to sting. My face burned. I stared at my plate. Under the table, my grandmother's hand squeezed mine. Evelyn Whitmore, founder of the company, Brooklyn-born, built her empire from one brownstone office in 1968. The only person in my family who never looked at me like I was a typo. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Let them talk. They don't see what I see." I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. 3 years later, she was gone. Pancreatic cancer. Fast. Brutal. I was the only one holding her hand in hospice when she took her last breath. Caroline had a deposition. My father had a board meeting. I had regret, and a small wooden box she'd given me 6 months before she died. "Don't open it yet," she'd said. "You'll know when." I kept it in my closet, untouched, until the day my father tried to fire me. April 2024. Subject line: position restructuring, confidential. I read the email 3 times. My job was being eliminated. Optics? HR said softly when I confronted them. The board thinks it's complicated having the CEO's daughter in a junior role. Complicated. Through the thin wall of my cubicle, I heard my father's voice. "We can't have her here when Caroline takes over. It looks bad. She'll land somewhere." My mother replied, "Something more appropriate." Appropriate. Like I was a stray dog being relocated. I went home that night to my tiny Queens apartment. 2 roommates, 1 broken radiator, view of a brick wall. And sat on my bed staring at that wooden box. Something inside me snapped, not dramatic, not loud, just done. I opened it. Inside was a letter, an old partnership agreement dated 1968, and a flash drive. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. "My dearest Lena, if you're reading this, your father has shown you exactly who he is." My throat tightened. She wrote about the original shares, the founding voting rights, the protection clauses Gerald never bothered to read carefully because he assumed control was his birthright. Then the sentence that changed everything: "I have transferred 51% of my shares to you." I stopped breathing. 51%, controlling interest. Current valuation approximately $47 million. I laughed, then I cried. Then I laughed again because this felt insane. There was one condition. I had 72 hours from receiving the official notice to call an emergency board meeting. If I didn't act, the will defaulted to the older version. The one leaving everything to my father. My grandmother had known me well enough to build in a deadline. She knew I'd hesitate. She knew I'd doubt myself. I stared at the clock, ticking, 72 hours to decide whether I would stay the dumb daughter or flip the entire Whitmore empire upside down. And that's when I made the call that would start a war. Type, each. In your head right now if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you. Because what happened in that boardroom, it didn't just cost my father his title. It cost us our family. And we're just getting started. The morning my father realized I wasn't the weak link. I was the majority shareholder, he stopped calling me sweetheart. He started calling his lawyer. May 18, 9:57 a.m. Whitmore Tower, 42nd floor. The elevator doors slid open to polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown. This was my father's kingdom. The air up there always smelled like leather chairs and ego. I stepped out wearing a blazer I borrowed from my roommate Jess, 2 sizes too big. Still had a thrift store tag tucked in the sleeve. Security blocked the boardroom doors. Name, Lena Whitmore. He frowned at his tablet. You're not on the authorized list. Before I could respond, Caroline's voice cut in behind me. She's not supposed to be. I turned. My sister looked immaculate, navy power suit, Hermes scarf. That effortless, the 900 an hour energy. What are you doing here, Lena? She asked, smiling like we were at brunch instead of a corporate execution. I have something to present to the board. Caroline let out a soft laugh. About what? Printer toner. The elevator dinged again. My father stepped out. Gerald Whitmore didn't look surprised to see me. He looked annoyed. Go home, he said flatly. This meeting doesn't concern you. A door opened behind him. It concerns her now. Margaret Lawson, the only remaining board member from my grandmother's era, stood in the doorway. 73. Silver Bob. Built half of Brooklyn with my grandmother back in the 70s. I invited her, Margaret said calmly. My father's jaw tightened. But he stepped aside. That was the first crack. The boardroom table seated 12. Oil portraits of past executives lined the walls, including my grandmother's. Her painted eyes seemed to follow me as I took a seat at the far end. Jonathan Blake, my grandmother's attorney, sat quietly near the window. Caroline whispered something to my father. He nodded once. Robert Hale, board chairman, cleared his throat. This emergency meeting was requested by 3 board members. Miss Whitmore, you have the floor. I stood. My legs were steady. My voice, surprisingly calm. Before I begin, my father interrupted smoothly, rising from his seat. I think context is important. Here we go. Lena is my daughter, he said warmly. And I love her deeply. But she works in an administrative capacity. She has no legal training, no financial background. And dyslexia, Caroline added gently. Which makes documents like these challenging. There it was. Public humiliation. Round 2, board members shifted uncomfortably. I felt the old instinct rise, shrink, apologize, sit down. But something colder had replaced it. Clarity. Are you finished? I asked. My father blinked. Robert Hale raised a hand. Miss Whitmore may proceed. I pulled the document from my portfolio. This is the last will and testament of Evelyn Whitmore. Executed September 12, 2019. Silence. My father didn't breathe. That's impossible, he said. Jonathan Blake stood. It is not. He confirmed its validity. Witnessed, notarized, filed properly. Robert Hale adjusted his glasses and read the key line aloud. To my granddaughter, Lena Whitmore, I bequeath 51% of my shares in Whitmore Development Group, including full voting rights. The air left the room. Caroline's lips parted. My father's face drained of color. That's a forgery, Caroline snapped. It isn't, Jonathan replied calmly. And I advise you not to pursue that accusation without evidence. My father slammed his hand on the table. My mother was ill. She was manipulated. I pulled out my phone. Maybe this will help clarify her mental state. I hit play. The 2018 board meeting recording filled the room, my father's voicey. She's too old to understand modern business. I moved to reduce her voting rights to 10%. The silence afterward was nuclear. Margaret spoke first. She recorded that meeting. She called me afterward. She wasn't confused, Gerald. She was heartbroken. Robert Hale looked at legal counsel. Within 45 minutes, verification was complete. The will was real, effective immediately. I owned 51% of Whitmore Development Group. The CEO worked for me. My father worked for me. And for the first time in my life, he looked afraid. Robert turned to me. As majority shareholder, you may propose motions. This was the moment. I could fire him instantly. Destroy him. Humiliate him the way he'd humiliated me for 20 years. Caroline leaned forward. Don't do this. My father stared at me like I was a stranger. I thought about Christmas dinners. About Lena is also here. About being placed near the kitchen at galas. Then I thought about my grandmother. She didn't build an empire to burn it down. I move for a vote of confidence in Gerald Whitmore as CEO. Caroline blinked. What? If the board has confidence in him, he stays. If not, he resigns. Corporate governance. Clean fair. Margaret immediately seconded the motion. Robert nodded. All in favor of retaining Gerald Whitmore as CEO. 4 hands. All opposed. 7 hands rose. 7. 1 abstention. Motion carried. My father had 30 days to resign. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stood slowly. Looked at me. And for the first time in 28 years, he saw me, not as the slow one. Not as the embarrassment. As the person who beat him. He walked out without a word. Caroline stayed seated, staring at the table like someone had just unplugged her identity. Outside the boardroom, my father grabbed my arm. You ungrateful little Gerald. My mother's voice snapped from down the hallway. She must have rushed over when she heard. He released me. You think this makes you powerful, he said quietly. You think you won. I didn't win, I replied. You lost. He laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you've started. He was right, because I didn't just take control of a company. I detonated a family. And Caroline. She hadn't spoken yet, but the look in her eyes said this wasn't over. Not even close. That night, New York City felt different. The skyline looked like something I owned instead of something I served. But power comes with consequences, and the first consequence was a phone call from Caroline at 2:13 a.m. Her voice wasn't polished. It wasn't composed. It was shaking. You ruined everything. I stared at the ceiling in my tiny queen's bedroom. No, I said softly. I just stopped letting you. Silence. Then she whispered something that changed everything. You don't understand what Dad promised me. And just like that, the story twisted again. If you thought the boardroom was brutal, wait until you hear what my father had been planning behind closed doors. The night my sister told me what Dad had promised her, I finally understood why she hated me more than she ever admitted. It wasn't just about power, it was about a future she thought I stole. Caroline showed up at my apartment the next morning. Unannounced. Which was wild, considering she'd never stepped foot in Queens before. She stood in my hallway in a cream trench coat that probably cost more than my rent, looking completely out of place between the cracked tile and the neighbor blasting Bad Bunny at 9 a.m. I need 5 minutes, she said. I let her in. Jess and Marisol were at work. The place smelled like burnt coffee and cheap lavender cleaner. Caroline glanced around, trying not to look horrified. This is where you live? She asked before she could stop herself. Yep. Welcome to the struggle. She didn't smile. She paced instead, like she was preparing for cross-examination. Dad promised me CEO by 35, she said finally. It was part of the plan. Since I was 16. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What plan? He structured my entire life around it. Law school wasn't optional. Clerkship wasn't optional. I didn't choose Sullivan and Moore. He did. Her voice cracked, barely, but I heard it. He said everything he built would be mine, the apartment on Park. The Hamptons house, the board seat. All of it. I stared at her. He told me you didn't want it, she added. My chest tightened. He said you weren't built for it. That you preferred a simple life. Simple. Like I was some background character in their dynasty. Caroline's jaw clenched. I spent my entire life being perfect for something you just walked in and took. The old me would have apologized. The old me would have said, "You deserve it more." But the boardroom changed something in me. "I didn't take anything," I said quietly. "Grandma chose. She was manipulated. She was strategic." We locked eyes, and for the first time in our lives there was no audience, no gala, no donors, no father orchestrating the narrative. Just two daughters trying to understand why love always felt conditional. "He told me if I didn't outperform you, the board would question his judgment," Caroline whispered. "He made us competitors before we could spell our own names." That hit harder than anything she'd said, because I remembered elementary school science fairs, her getting praised for a volcano made from scratch, me getting a polite nod for a solar system poster I traced, not because she was better, because she was showcased. Dad used to introduce her as my legacy. I was Lena. "You think I wanted this?" I asked. "Yes," she said instantly. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "I wanted you to defend me once," I said. "Just once, when he called me slow. When he laughed at me in front of investors." Her silence said everything. "I couldn't," she whispered. "Why?" "Because if he turned on me too, I'd have nothing." There it was. Fear, not superiority. Fear. The golden child isn't golden, she's just more useful. We sat in my tiny kitchen like strangers sharing DNA. "Dad isn't going quietly," Caroline said finally. "He's already calling litigation teams. He's looking for a way to contest the will." "I know. He thinks you don't have the stamina for a legal war." I smirked. "He also thought I couldn't read contracts." Caroline looked at me carefully. "When did you learn all of this?" she asked. "Grandma." That shut her up, because Grandma never trained Caroline in secret. She trained me. After Caroline left, I got a call from Robert Hale. "The board needs to meet with you regarding transition plans," he said. "There's another issue." Of course there was. "What kind of issue?" He hesitated. "Your father approved a redevelopment project in the Bronx last year. It's under investigation." My stomach dropped. "For what?" "Environmental compliance violations." Oh no. Is it serious? Potentially catastrophic." He paused. "There are internal documents suggesting safety reports were expedited." Expedited. Corporate code for ignored. My brain started connecting dots. Grandma always emphasized sustainable development. Dad always emphasized speed. If corners were cut under his watch, this wasn't just about power anymore. This was about liability. And I now owned 51% of it. That afternoon, I met Margaret Lawson at a cafe in Brooklyn Heights. She didn't waste time. "Gerald pushed that Bronx project through despite objections," she said bluntly. "It was profitable on paper, not so much in practice." Was the board aware? Partially. He downplayed concerns. "Do we know how bad it is?" Margaret slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inspection photos, structural issues, water contamination risks, community complaints ignored. My chest tightened. "If this becomes public, it will," she said calmly. "And when it does, you'll either look like the reformer who cleaned house, or the nervy heiress who inherited a mess she couldn't manage." Margaret studied me. "This is your first real test. Not a vote. Not a confrontation. Responsibility." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared. Because I was furious. Furious that my father jeopardized communities to inflate quarterly earnings. Furious that Caroline had been groomed to inherit something built on cracks. Furious that I almost walked away from all of this because I thought I didn't belong. At 3:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. "Hello." Silence. Then my father's voice. "You think the board is loyal to you?" His tone was calm. Too calm. "I think they voted," I replied. He chuckled softly. "You're emotional, Lena, idealistic. That makes you predictable. What do you want?" "To remind you that control doesn't equal competence." There it was. The old script. "You have 78 days before the annual shareholder meeting," he continued. "If confidence shifts before then, things can change." A threat. Subtle, strategic. "Are you trying to scare me?" I asked. "I'm trying to educate you." He hung up. I stared at my phone in the dark. 78 days. If he convinced enough shareholders I was unstable, inexperienced, unfit, he could force a vote. Remove me. Turn this entire thing around. And I knew something else. Gerald Whitmore didn't threaten unless he already had a plan. The next morning, the New York Business Journal dropped a headline: Whitmore development under scrutiny for Bronx project violations. And guess whose name was attached to the new ownership structure? Mine. The comments section was brutal. Nepotism princess. Boardroom coup. Unqualified heiress. My chest tightened. Dad didn't need to attack me directly. He just needed the public to doubt me. And suddenly, I wasn't fighting for control of a company. I was fighting for credibility, and if I didn't handle the Bronx situation perfectly, he'd win without ever stepping back into that boardroom. That evening, Caroline texted me. We need to talk. It's worse than you think. My pulse spiked. I called her immediately. What do you mean worse? She hesitated. There's something in the compliance reports Dad buried. What? A long pause. Someone got sick. My blood ran cold. Lena, there's a family threatening to sue. And just like that, this wasn't corporate drama anymore. It was personal. If you think power is glamorous, wait until you see what it costs. The moment I read the medical report, my hands started shaking. Not because of the lawsuit. Because of the kid's age. 7 years old, same age I was when I got diagnosed with dyslexia and my father decided I was defective. His name was Mateo Alvarez. Asthma attacks, skin rashes, hospital visits. His mom believed it started after they moved into one of our newly renovated Bronx buildings. The same project under investigation, the same one my father rushed through despite environmental warnings. I stared at the file Caroline slid across my kitchen table that night. He buried this? I asked. Caroline nodded. Legal received a notice 2 months ago. Dad settled quietly with 2 other families. Non-disclosure agreements. This one refused. Of course they did. Some people can't afford silence. How bad is the exposure? I asked. Caroline exhaled slowly. If contamination is proven and negligence is tied to executive decision-making, 8 figures. Maybe more. And criminal liability. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. The next morning, I walked into Whitmore Tower knowing something had shifted. Not in the board. In the staff. People looked at me differently now, not dismissive. Evaluating. Could I fix it or would I implode? Robert Hale called an emergency executive session. Margaret Lawson sat to my left. Caroline to my right. An outside environmental firm presented findings. Elevated mold levels. Improper ventilation installation. Fast-tracked approvals. And then the line that made my stomach drop. Internal correspondence indicates executive pressure to override remediation delays. Executive pressure. Gerald Whitmore's fingerprints were everywhere. Robert turned to me. As majority shareholder, this falls under your authority. We need direction. Direction. Not comfort. Not permission. Direction. I took a breath. We disclose everything. The room stiffened. Caroline's head snapped toward me. Full transparency. I continued. Independent audit. Public statement. Offer relocation and medical coverage for affected families immediately. That opens us to massive liability. One board member protested. We're already liable, I said calmly. The only question is whether we look honest or corrupt. Margaret's lips twitched. Approval. Robert nodded slowly. It's bold. It's necessary. And for the first time in my life, no one questioned whether I understood what I was saying. By noon, my father was in the building. Of course he was. He stormed into my temporary office, the irony not lost on either of us. You're going public? He demanded. Yes. You'll tank the stock valuation. I'd rather tank valuation than bury families. He scoffed. You're Nava. No, I said evenly. You're reckless. His eyes darkened. You have no idea how this industry works. I have a very clear idea, I replied. And it's exactly why we're cleaning this up. He stepped closer. You think the board supports you now? Wait until investors start bleeding. Are you threatening me again? I'm reminding you, he said quietly. That power shifts fast. Then he leaned in. You always needed someone to hold your hand, Lena. Let's see how long you last without one. He walked out. And for the first time, his words didn't cut, they revealed. He genuinely believed I couldn't survive without him. That afternoon, we held a press conference. I stood at the podium in a simple black suit. No designer armor, no flashy branding. Just me. Flashes exploded as reporters shouted questions. Miss Whitmore, did you know about the violations before assuming control? No. I answered clearly. And that's precisely why we're conducting an independent review. Are you blaming your father? I'm taking responsibility. That silenced them, because accountability is louder than deflection. We are covering medical expenses. I continued. We are offering relocation options, and we are implementing new environmental oversight protocols effective immediately. A reporter raised her hand. Why should the public trust you? I paused. Because this mattered. Because I'm not here to protect ego, I said. I'm here to protect people. The room went still. The backlash was immediate. Stock dipped 6% in 48 hours. Social media split in half. Some called me brave. Others called me incompetent. Dad gave a private statement to a financial publication claiming he had concerns about inexperienced leadership making emotional decisions. Translation: me. Caroline sent me a screenshot. He's trying to frame you as unstable, she said. Let him. But inside, the pressure was building. Investors wanted reassurance, board members wanted projections. And I wanted sleep. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Madio's mother requested a meeting. Not with legal, with me. I drove to the Bronx myself. No driver, no PR team. Just me and a Starbucks iced coffee I didn't touch. The building looked fine from the outside. Brick. Clean facade. But inside, the air felt heavy. She met me in the lobby. Mid-30s. Exhausted eyes. Protective stance. I didn't expect you to come, she said. I needed to. We sat on a worn bench. I don't want money, she said immediately. I want acknowledgement. My throat tightened. You have it. My son was healthy, she continued. Now he sleeps with a nebulizer. I swallowed hard? I can't undo that? I said quietly. But I can make sure it never happens again. She studied me for a long moment. You're not like your father. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, and it hit deeper than any headline. That night, the independent audit confirmed it. Gerald had overridden environmental recommendations to meet investor timelines. Emails, timestamps, direct instructions. It wasn't negligence, it was intentional. Robert called an emergency vote to remove Gerald immediately rather than waiting out his 30-day resignation window. This time, it wasn't close. Unanimous. He was out, effective immediately. No transition period, no advisory role, just gone. He called me that evening. You think you're proud of this? He said. No, I replied. Then what are you? I looked out my apartment window at the Manhattan skyline. Different. Silence. You're burning bridges you'll need one day. I'm building better ones. He exhaled sharply. You'll regret humiliating me. I didn't humiliate you, I said calmly. Your emails did. He hung up. And just like that, Gerald Whitmore wasn't CEO anymore. But losing his title didn't mean he lost influence. Because 2 days later, an anonymous shareholder petition began circulating, claiming I had mishandled crisis response, calling for a special vote to reassess majority control, and the funding behind it, massive, strategic, organized. I didn't need proof to know who was behind it. Dad wasn't fighting from the throne anymore. He was fighting from the shadows. And shadow wars, they're harder to see coming. If you think this was the end of him, you don't know powerful men who feel cornered. The petition hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m., subject line, Emergency Shareholder Confidence Review. I hadn't even had coffee yet. 17 minority shareholders had signed it overnight. That wasn't random, that was coordinated. Carefully, expensively coordinated. The language was surgical: concerns regarding inexperienced leadership, emotional crisis management impacting stock stability, risk exposure under current majority direction. Emotional, there it was again. Not wrong, not corrupt. Emotional, code for female, code for unstable, code for easy to discredit. I set my phone down slowly and stared at the ceiling of my Brooklyn apartment. Dad didn't need 51%, he just needed enough noise to shake confidence. And confidence was currency. By 9 a.m., I was in Robert Hale's office. "They're calling for a special vote at the annual shareholder meeting," he said, sliding the printed petition across his desk. "How many shares do they represent?" "About 18% collectively." I did the math instantly. "With mine, that still isn't enough." "No," Robert said carefully. "But if they persuade institutional investors to align with them, then it could be." Power doesn't always shift with ownership. Sometimes it shifts with perception. "Who's backing this?" I asked. Robert didn't answer directly. But he didn't need to. By noon, a financial news outlet ran a headline: "Whitmore Majority Hair Faces Shareholder Revolt." The article quoted sources close to former leadership. Former leadership. My father wasn't even subtle. Caroline stormed into my office 30 minutes later. "He's meeting with private equity groups," she said, breath tight, pitching himself as the stabilizing alternative. "Can he legally do that?" "He's not under non-compete. He's under humiliation." That almost made me laugh. Almost. "He thinks you'll fold under pressure," she continued. "He's betting you don't have the stomach for a drawn-out proxy fight." A proxy fight, corporate warfare, public, messy, strategic. "You standing with me?" I asked quietly. Caroline hesitated, just a flicker, then nodded. Yes. Not because she suddenly believed in me, because she'd finally seen who Dad really was. And maybe she was done being his weapon. That week was brutal. Investor calls back to back. Conference rooms, Zoom screens, men in gray suits testing my composure. One of them, a hedge fund manager from Chicago, leaned back in his chair and asked, "Do you believe you're qualified to run a $90 million development firm?" There it was. The question my father planted everywhere. "I believe I'm qualified to lead it responsibly," I replied. "That's not what I asked." I held his gaze. "Then ask the question you actually mean." Silence. Respect flickered. These rooms weren't about knowledge. They were about nerve. And I had more than they expected. But the pressure wasn't just professional, it was personal. Anonymous emails started landing in my inbox. "Go back to your lane. Daddy's company isn't your playground. You'll ruin everything." At first, I brushed it off. Then someone leaked photos of my Queens apartment from before I moved. Caption: "From copy room to corner office." Mocking. Diminishing. Dad knew optics mattered. He was trying to shrink me back into the box he'd built one night. After a 12-hour day, I found myself sitting on my apartment floor, back against the couch, staring at nothing. For a second. Just 1 second. Doubt slipped in. What if he's right? What if I'm in over my head? What if I only won because of paperwork, not skill? And then my phone buzzed. Margaret Lawson. "You sound tired?" she said immediately. "I am." I blinked. "Good. Means you're working." Gerald never got tired. He delegated consequences. I let that settle. "They're pushing hard," I admitted. "They're scared," she corrected. "Off me?" "Off change." Silence stretched between us. "Lena," she said finally, "your grandmother once told me something after a zoning battle in '82. She said, if they're attacking your character, it's because they can't attack your numbers." I sat up slowly. Numbers. If Dad wanted a proxy war, we'd give him performance. The next board meeting, I proposed something aggressive. "We accelerate the Sustainable Redevelopment Initiative," I said. "Relocate 15% of capital into green retrofits and affordable housing tax incentives." Several board members stiffened. "That's high risk." One warned, "It's high visibility." I countered. "And high return over 5 years." Caroline leaned forward. "ESG alignment could attract new institutional investors." Margaret nodded slowly. "We rebrand Whitmore as forward thinking," I continued, "not scandal-ridden." Robert studied me. "You're playing offense?" "I'm done playing defense." Vote passed. Narrowly. But it passed. 2 weeks later, something shifted. An environmental impact report praised our transparency. A major pension fund publicly supported our sustainability pivot. Stock rebounded 4%. The narrative started changing. Headlines shifted from "shareholder revolt" to "Whitmore reinvents under new leadership." Dad's silence grew louder. He wasn't used to losing control of the storyline. Then came the real blow. A forensic audit uncovered something buried in the Bronx project accounting. Cost reallocation, unreported executive bonuses tied to early completion milestones. Bonuses approved by Gerald Whitmore. Paid out before safety clearance was finalized. My stomach turned. It wasn't just negligence, it was profit. Robert looked at me across the table. This changes things. Yes, I said quietly. It may open criminal exposure. I nodded. And here was the crossroads. Protect him quietly to avoid scandal, or release it and risk detonating the Whitmore name permanently. That night, I drove past our old Upper East Side townhouse, lights on. Same polished exterior, same illusion of perfection. For a moment, I saw myself at 12 years old, sitting at that long mahogany dinner table, believing every word Dad said about who I was. I rolled down the window and let the cold air hit my face. Then I made the decision. The next morning, I authorized full disclosure to regulatory authorities. No internal shielding, no quiet settlement, full transparency. Caroline found me in my office afterward. You know what this means, she said softly. Yes. He could face charges. Yes. He's still our father. I met her eyes. And those families are still affected. She didn't argue, because she knew. 2 days later, federal investigators requested documentation. Dad's legal team went silent. The anonymous shareholder petition lost momentum overnight. Funny how confidence shifts when liability gets real. But power fights back. And that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you're untouchable? Check your email. I opened my inbox. There it was. A leaked internal memo from years ago. My name on it. Subject line, performance concerns. Lena Whitmore. Dad had kept a file on me. Detailed notes questioning my cognitive capability. Private medical references. He'd documented my dyslexia like it was corporate risk. And now someone was threatening to leak it publicly. Not to hurt the company. To hurt me. And suddenly, the war wasn't about control. It was about identity. If that memo went public, the narrative wouldn't be bold reformer. It would be unfit heiress with learning disorder. Dad was cornered. And cornered men burn everything down. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. This wasn't corporate anymore. This was personal annihilation. And I had 72 hours before the annual shareholder meeting. 72 hours before votes were cast. 72 hours before my father either lost completely or took me with him. If you think boardroom battles are brutal, wait until you see what happens when family secrets hit the press. The email was timed perfectly. 2 days before the annual shareholder meeting, 48 hours before the confidence vote. Right when momentum had finally started tilting in my favor. Subject line. You should get ahead of this. Attached a PDF, 37 pages, my name in bold at the top, internal executive assessment, Lena Whitmore. Dated 2016, I was 20, still in college, still trying to figure out why reading one chapter took me 4 hours. I opened it slowly, line by line. Demonstrates inconsistent processing speed. May lack executive level analytical stamina. Reputation risk if placed in visible leadership role. Learning disorder could undermine investor confidence. My father had turned my dyslexia into a corporate liability profile. He'd circulated it to senior leadership, not to protect the company, to justify sidelining me. My chest tightened, not because of the words, because of how familiar they felt. He'd been building this narrative for years. If this leaked publicly, the headlines would write themselves. Majority heirs' cognitive limits questioned. The shareholder revolt would have its ammunition. I felt 12 again. Small, exposed, reduced to a diagnosis, for about 10 seconds. Then something snapped into focus. He thought this would shame me. He thought I'd panic, hide, resign quietly to avoid embarrassment. He still didn't understand something. I was done being embarrassed for surviving differently. I called Caroline first. She picked up immediately. You saw it? Yes. Silence. He kept files like that on you too? She asked carefully. No, I said. I was the only risk. Her breath hitched. I'm so sorry. Did you know about this? No. And I believed her. This was Gerald's private arsenal. I'm not burying it, I said. What? I'm not hiding. Caroline went quiet. Lena, if that memo goes public, I'm putting it out myself. A beat. That's aggressive. It's honest. By noon I had PR in my office, 2 consultants, crisis specialists, expensive. Under no circumstances should you voluntarily release a document questioning your competence. One of them said. It'll be weaponized. It already is, I replied. If you ignore it, it may not gain traction. I leaned forward. He wrote that about me when I was 20. He used my dyslexia to justify excluding me from leadership. That's not the public's problem. The consultant said bluntly. Investors care about stability. I held her gaze. I am stable, but perception. I am done managing perception. Silence. Robert Hale, who'd been listening quietly, finally spoke. What are you proposing? I took a breath. We released the memo. With context. They all stared at me, and I speak. That evening, I recorded a video statement, no teleprompter, no script written by PR, just me. Camera set up in my office. Whitmore logo behind me. I looked straight into the lens. My name is Lena Whitmore. I'm dyslexic. I have been since I was 7 years old. No dramatic music, no tears. Just truth. I read slower than most people. I process information differently. I build systems visually. I see patterns before others do. That difference was once labeled a weakness inside this company. I held up the memo. This document was written about me 8 years ago. It questioned my capability, my stamina, my worth. I paused. I'm releasing it today because leadership isn't about pretending you're flawless. It's about being transparent. I leaned closer. If my dyslexia disqualifies me in your eyes, then vote accordingly. No tremor in my voice. But if you believe accountability, ethics, and growth matter more than optics, then I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We uploaded it at 7:42 p.m. By 9:00 p.m., it was everywhere. LinkedIn, Twitter, financial blogs. The reaction, explosive. Messages poured in. CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs. I'm dyslexic too. Thank you for saying this. You just changed the narrative. An investor from Boston emailed, I've been hiding my ADHD for 20 years. Respect. The memo stopped being a weapon. It became proof. Proof that the old regime equated difference with deficiency. Stock didn't drop. It stabilized, then ticked up. Dad called at 11:03 p.m. You're turning this into a sympathy campaign, he asked coldly. No, I said calmly. I'm turning it into a conversation. You're embarrassing the family. I learned from the best. Silence crackled between us. You think investors want vulnerability? He pressed. I think they want integrity. He exhaled sharply. You're naive, maybe? I replied. But I'm not ashamed. His voice shifted. Lower. Dangerous. You've just made this personal. It's always been personal. He hung up. The next morning was the shareholder meeting. Grand ballroom at the Intercontinental downtown. 200 attendees. Media outside. Investors inside. I walked in wearing a simple navy suit. No flashy jewelry. No armor, just confidence. Caroline walked beside me. For once, not in front. The atmosphere buzzed. Whispers, phones, speculation. Dad stood across the room with a cluster of older investors. He looked composed. But I saw it. The tension in his jaw. The calculation. He hadn't expected me to own the narrative. The meeting began. Financial updates. Audit summaries. Performance metrics. Then came the vote. The proxy results were projected on a massive screen. Confidence in current majority leadership 72%. Opposition 26%. Abstain 2%. It wasn't close. It wasn't fragile. It was decisive. A ripple of applause filled the room. Dad didn't clap. He stood still. Watching. Realizing. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't grandma's paperwork. It wasn't emotional impulse. It was leadership, and he'd lost. After the meeting, he approached me. No crowd, no board, just us. You're enjoying this, he said quietly. No, I answered honestly. I'm surviving it. He studied me for a long moment. I built that company. Grandma built it. I corrected gently. His eyes hardened. You think you're better than me? I shook my head. I think I'm different. Silence stretched. You'll fail eventually, he said softly. Maybe, I replied. But it'll be my failure. That hit him, because control had always been his currency. And I'd just taken it out of circulation. He walked away. For real this time. That night, I went home to Brooklyn Heights, sat on my balcony overlooking the bridge. City humming below, phone buzzing nonstop. But I ignored it. For the first time in weeks I felt still, not victorious, not vindicated, just grounded. Then my phone vibrated again. "Caroline. You won," she said. "We won." She was quiet. "Dad's leaving New York." My stomach tightened. "Where?" "Florida. Some investors down there. Retreat, regroup, maybe rebuild. Power doesn't disappear, it relocates." But for now, he was gone. I thought that meant peace was coming? I was wrong. Because 3 weeks later, federal investigators contacted me again, not about Grandma. A document from 1974 had surfaced. A clause none of us knew existed. A clause that could change everything again. And suddenly, the inheritance story wasn't finished. It was evolving. If you thought this was the climax, we're not there yet. The federal investigator didn't sound dramatic. That's how I knew it was serious. "Ms. Whitmore," he said evenly over the phone, "we've uncovered a founding partnership clause from 1974 that may affect your controlling shares." My stomach dropped. "I already control 51%. I said carefully. "Yes," he replied, "but this clause predates the 2019 will." Silence stretched. "And?" I ask. "It contains a conditional reversion. 2 words. Cold, technical, dangerous." "A what?" "A clause stating that if a majority shareholder's decisions materially endanger the long-term stability of Whitmore Development, voting rights may be temporarily suspended by unanimous board action." My pulse slowed in that strange way it does before impact. "So you're telling me? If the board unanimously deems your leadership destabilizing, they could suspend your majority voting authority." Unanimous. All 12, including Margaret, including Robert, including Caroline, once she formally took her advisory seat. This wasn't Dad's proxy fight. This was Grandma's fail-safe. And suddenly, I understood something chilling. She hadn't just protected me from him. She'd protected the company from me too. I hung up and sat very still. Brooklyn sunlight poured through the windows. Coffee went cold in my hand. Power had never been unconditional. Grandma never believed in blind inheritance. She believed in earned stewardship. And now I had to ask myself something brutally honest. Had I earned it yet? I called Margaret first. "You knew?" I said when she answered. A long pause. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't relevant," she replied calmly. "Until now." "Until what?" "Until you faced your first real moral crossroads." I closed my eyes. "The Bronx disclosure." "Yes." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. If I had buried the audit, if I had chosen optics over ethics, the board might have invoked that clause. And I would have deserved it. Grandma built a throne with a trapdoor. Just in case. Emergency board meeting was called for the next morning. Not to remove me, to clarify governance. Still, the optics were dangerous. Media caught wind quickly. "Whitmore leadership faces structural challenge." Dad wasted no time commenting to a Florida-based business outlet. "Governance clauses exist for a reason." Of course he did. He wasn't inside the room anymore. But he was still circling it. The boardroom felt different this time, less adversarial, more evaluative. Robert Hale addressed the table. The 1974 clause was standard protection at the time. Rarely invoked, never activated. His eyes landed on me. "But it exists." I nodded. "I'm aware." One board member spoke up. "We need clarity on what constitutes material endangerment." Margaret answered before I could. "Historically, financial recklessness, fraud, intentional concealment of risk." All eyes shifted to me. I met them steadily. "Then I welcome the scrutiny," I said. Robert leaned forward. "Lena, you understand this clause could technically be used by any future board if sentiment shifts." "Yes." "And you're comfortable continuing leadership under that condition?" "Yes." No hesitation, because here's the thing. Real power doesn't need immunity. It needs accountability. The vote wasn't about suspending me, it was about affirming continued confidence under the clause. Unanimous support. All 12 hands. Even the members who once doubted me. Even the cautious ones, even Caroline. It wasn't dramatic, no applause. Just quiet confirmation. I wasn't untouchable, I was trusted, and somehow that meant more. After the meeting, Margaret walked with me to the elevator. She built that clause because she didn't believe in dynasties. She said. She believed in guardians. I exhaled slowly. She trusted you? Margaret added. But she trusted the structure more. That's fair. Margaret smiled slightly. You've passed your first test. Feels like there will be more. There always are. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I was thinking. About legacy. About ego. About how easily I could become what I fought against. Power reshapes people. Even the ones who swear it won't. I walked into my living room and stared at Grandma's portrait on the wall. You never wanted me to win. I murmured. You wanted me to grow. The realization hit like cold water. She didn't give me control to validate me. She gave it to challenge me, to see if I'd choose integrity over comfort, transparency over pride, responsibility over revenge, and so far I had. A week later, Dad called again. I almost didn't answer. What now? I asked. He sounded different. Less sharp. Less certain. I heard about the clause, he said. I'm sure you did. They didn't use it. No. Silence. You could have buried the Bronx audit, he said quietly. Saved yourself the trouble. I know. Why didn't you? Because this mattered. Because families mattered. Because ego destroys faster than it builds. But I didn't say any of that. I'm not you, I said instead. That landed. He exhaled slowly. I thought strength meant control, he admitted after a beat. It doesn't. It meant never looking weak. I leaned against the kitchen counter. And now? Another pause. I'm not sure anymore. That was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd ever heard from him. We didn't fix anything that night. But something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just recognition. 3 months later, Whitmore Development announced its first fully sustainable redevelopment initiative, affordable housing, green energy compliance, community investment. Press coverage was positive, investor steady, stock stable, not explosive growth, not flashy headlines, just healthy. Which honestly, felt revolutionary. Caroline started showing up at my Brooklyn apartment on Sundays, no suits. No strategy. Just coffee and conversation. We were learning each other without our father's script. And it was awkward. And messy. And real. One afternoon she said something that stuck with me. You know what scares me? She asked. What? That you might actually be better at this than I ever would have been. I smiled softly. We're not competing anymore. She nodded. I know. That's just going to take a while to feel normal. Fair. Winter rolled in quietly. The city softened under cold light. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting. I wasn't proving. I wasn't defending. I was leading. Not loudly, not perfectly. But honestly, I thought that was the ending. I was wrong. Because in January a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. You still don't know the whole truth about 2019. No signature. No explanation. Just that. And suddenly, the past wasn't finished with me yet. The handwriting looked familiar. That's what made my hands shake. Not the message. Not the mystery. The loops on the Y. The sharp slant of the T. I'd seen it my whole childhood. On birthday cards, on sticky notes left on the fridge, on Christmas tags tied to gifts under the tree. It was my mother's handwriting. But my mother had been dead for 3 years. Car accident on the Merritt Parkway. Rain. Late night charity gala. Single vehicle. Lost control. That's what the police report said. That's what Dad told us. That's what I'd believed. Until now, the note said. You still don't know the whole truth about 2019. 2019 wasn't just Grandma's death. It was Mom's too. 2 months apart. I couldn't breathe. I drove straight to Westchester. To the old house. The one Dad still technically owned but barely used now that he'd relocated to Florida. It was empty. Cold. Smelled like dust and old hardwood. I went straight to Mom's office. She'd kept everything. She was the archivist of the family. I opened filing cabinets, boxes, closets, nothing. Then I remembered something random. 4th of July, years ago, family BBQ, Mom laughing, telling me, if anything ever feels off, trust your gut, Lena. It's louder than logic. I walked into the kitchen. Stood in the exact spot she used to stand making lemonade. Looked up. Crown molding, one section slightly discolored. My pulse quickened. I dragged a chair over, reached up, pressed, click. A tiny hidden panel popped open. Inside, a flash drive, and a sealed envelope. My name written on it, in her handwriting. I didn't open it there. I drove back to Brooklyn. Locked my door. Sat on my living room floor. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Inside was a letter. 3 pages. Trembling handwriting. Dated September 2019. 2 weeks before her accident. Lena, it began. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain. My throat closed. She wrote about Grandma's will. About tension in the house. About arguments she overheard between Dad and Grandma. About money being moved. Accounts shifted. Assets restructured. Things Grandma didn't approve. And then the line that made my vision blur. I confronted your father about it. He was angrier than I've ever seen him. I stopped reading. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the city noise outside. I forced myself to continue. He said I was overreacting. That it was just business. But Lena, it didn't feel like business. It felt like desperation. Desperation. 2 weeks later, she was dead. Officially hydroplaning in heavy rain. Unofficially, my stomach twisted. I plugged in the flash drive. It contained audio files. 3 of them. Dated September 3rd, 7th and 14th. I clicked the first one. Mom's voice. Clear, shaky. I'm recording this because if something happens, I want there to be proof. I covered my mouth. She'd known. Or at least suspected. The audio was a recording of an argument. Dad's voice was unmistakable. You're blowing this out of proportion, Claire. I saw the transfers, Gerald. Don't lie to me. It's strategic restructuring. It's hiding assets before the will finalizes. Silence. Then him. Lower. Colder. You don't understand how much is at stake. I understand exactly what's at stake. The recording cut. I couldn't breathe. I opened the second file. More tension. More accusations. Mom saying, this isn't just about you anymore. Dad snapping, stay out of it. The third file ended with something that made my blood run cold. Mom. If anything happens to me, Lena needs to know. Then the sound of a door slamming. I sat there for a long time, trying to piece it together. Grandma dies, will finalized. Control shifts to me. Dad loses majority. Mom dead 2 months later. I didn't want to think it. I didn't want to even form the thought. But I had to. Was it an accident, or was it something else? I called Caroline. Immediately. She came over within 30 minutes. I played the recordings. She didn't interrupt. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. When the last file ended, she whispered. Oh my God. Did you know? I asked. No. She looked wrecked. I thought they were just arguing about succession. They were. And something more. I said quietly. We didn't go to the police immediately, not because we wanted to protect Dad, but because we needed facts. We hired a private investigator, quietly, carefully, no media, no board involvement. If this exploded publicly without proof, it would destroy everything, including the company, including us. Weeks passed. Tension like static in my bones. Then the investigator called. Brake line tampering is difficult to prove after this long, he said carefully. But the accident report noted inconsistent pressure failure. My stomach flipped, and there was a maintenance request logged 2 days before the accident. It was cancelled. Cancelled by who? A pause. The room tilted. Caroline grabbed my arm. No, she whispered. I felt strangely calm. Too calm, like my body shut down the panic so I could function. That's not proof, I said. It's circumstantial. The investigator confirmed. But it's concerning? Concerning. That word felt insultingly small. I flew to Florida 2 days later. Didn't tell Caroline. Didn't tell the board. I needed to see him. In person. He met me at his condo in Naples. Ocean view. Quiet wealth. He looked older. Smaller somehow. You didn't call, he said. I didn't want to. We stood facing each other. No boardroom. No lawyers. No cameras. Just father and daughter. I found Mom's recordings? I said. His face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. You went through the house, he said slowly. She hid them. Silence. You were moving money before Grandma died. It was strategic positioning. You canceled Mom's car maintenance. His jaw tightened. That's what this is about. Answer me. I didn't kill your mother. The denial came fast. Too fast. I didn't say you did. He looked away, toward the ocean. She was going to blow everything up. He muttered. She was going to expose you. She didn't understand. Then explain it. He turned back to me. Anger, fear, pride. All tangled. I was protecting this family. Be hiding assets. Be preventing instability. Be threatening her. I never touched her car. He snapped. Silence crashed over us. I studied him. Every micro-expression, every flicker. Was he guilty, or just a man who'd gone too far in business and lost control of the narrative? I didn't know. And that was the worst part. I have the recordings. I said quietly. If I go to the authorities, this becomes criminal. He swallowed. You'd destroy your own father. I'd protect my mother's truth. We stood there for what felt like hours. Finally, he said something I never expected. If I step down permanently, sell my remaining shares, publicly acknowledge misconduct in asset transfers, will that be enough? It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't innocence either. It was surrender. And maybe that's what this had always been about. Control, power, ego, versus accountability. I didn't send him to prison that day. Because I didn't have proof. Because revenge wasn't justice. Because my mother's voice in those recordings didn't sound like a woman who wanted her daughters destroyed in the fallout. Instead, I made a choice, one that changed everything. Gerald Whitmore signed over his remaining stake, resigned from all advisory roles, publicly admitted to improper pre-will financial structuring, no criminal charges, but permanent exile from the company, and from us. Spring came slowly to New York, cherry blossoms in Central Park, construction cranes against blue sky. Whitmore development moved forward, stronger, cleaner, transparent. Caroline and I co-hosted the annual family BBQ this year. No tension, no power plays, just cousins running around and burgers burning on the grill. Sometimes I still think about the break lines. About what might have happened. About what might never be proven. But I also think about Grandma's claws. About Mom's recordings. About the fact that power without conscience destroys everything in its path. I used to think the 47 million check proved them wrong, that it was the victory. It wasn't. The real proof is that I didn't become what they expected. I didn't become small, or bitter, or ruthless. I became responsible, and maybe that's what being the dumb one gave me. Time to observe. Time to question. Time to choose differently. Power isn't about winning, it's about what you refuse to lose while holding it. And I refuse to lose myself. That's the legacy I'm keeping.